Hey everyone. Today I want to talk about a topic that's deeply personal to me. It's punishment in sports. It's not something I ever thought I would need to talk about in relation to parkour, because for years it just wasn't an issue. But a few years ago, something happened in a class that kind of brought back these memories that I thought I'd left behind. We were practicing precision jumps, which is jumping from one narrow beam to another, which is something I'm really not very good at anyway. And one of the instructors said, if you don't stick the jump, you have to do 5 squats. And at first I was confused, like, why are we being punished for missing a jump? These mistakes are part of the learning process. They're mistakes that happen to anyone, no matter what their skill level. Now, I knew this kind of stemmed from kids that had been goofing off in classes, and it was a way to try to keep them in line. So, some kids would miss jumps on purpose and would be goofing off and not really trying. But over time, it turned into this regular thing for anyone in the class. And, it reminded me of when I was in school and one kid got in trouble, but the whole class got in trouble. For someone like me who already feels self-conscious when struggling with skills, this really felt like punishment for messing up, and it made things harder. It took away my focus and replaced it with anxiety. Anxiety about failing in front of everyone and about being singled out, about facing the humiliation of doing squats while everybody else watched. And, mistakes are how we learn. They teach us what doesn't work and how to adjust and improve. And it really wasn't about the squats themselves. If he had said, hey, every time you do this jump, then do 5 squats, no matter whether you make it or not, that would have been fine with me. Squats in a parkour gym is really no big deal. But it was the idea of singling people out because they couldn't do the skill or they messed up. And some kids would even tease other kids who had to do the squats. And, a lot of the times the instructors, they have so many kids in the class, they don't see that happening. When mistakes are penalized, they interrupt the learning process. So instead of trying harder, many people become afraid to try at all. And the focus shifts from learning and growth to simply avoiding failure. And, for me, that fear of failure can become so overwhelming that it's paralyzing. Instead of pushing myself to improve, I was just trying to not mess up. And that mindset held me back. And I'm not the only one who's experienced this. Research has shown that punishment in sports doesn't actually improve performance. It actually increases anxiety and shifts the focus from skill development to just avoiding mistakes. Instead of learning and improving, athletes become hesitant and fearful, just like I did. That fear of failure can be so strong that it holds people back from even trying. Now, I'm an adult, and something like this probably shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did. But I think it triggered something from my childhood. This experience reminded me of my high school basketball days. This was back in the 80s, and I had a coach who ruled through fear and intimidation. Every practice, every game was punishment based. If you missed the pass, if you lost the ball, or made any kind of mistake, he would yell at you. Not just corrections, full-blown yelling that tore you down. He'd say things like, you lost all your talent. You're not good anymore. And those words cut deeply. Basketball was my life when I was growing up. I lived it and I breathed it. And before I had this coach, I was a solid player, sometimes scoring more than 20 points in a game. But over time, his constant criticism and yelling and humiliation took something I was passionate about and made me absolutely dread it. I started to feel like I couldn't do anything right. Like every mistake I made was proof that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good anymore. I, it got so bad that I became ill from the stress. I stopped eating during the day because I was so anxious, and the pain in my stomach would sometimes cause me to actually pass out. So I wouldn't eat before school. I only ate after school on the week and on the weekends. So, instead of going to lunch, I'd go to the gym and practice. You know, but lack of practice wasn't my problem. I hadn't lost my talent. I had lost my confidence, or rather, it had been stripped away from me. My weight dropped drastically, and I lost like, I don't know, 15 to 20 pounds, which left me weak and exhausted and even less able to perform. No matter how hard I worked, how much I practiced, it was never enough. In fact, the harder I tried, the worse I got. I was too afraid to make a mistake, and that fear became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I couldn't do the simplest things. And the coach made it worse. He didn't just criticize my performance, he made it personal. I remember during one game, he grabbed me by the arm and jerked me towards him, and he said, "Go in for her, and if you do the same thing she did, you're going to be right back on this bench." I didn't even know what she had done, but I just knew that no matter what I did, I was going to fail. And I probably did within a minute. And I was probably right back on the bench. But here's the thing, defying him wasn't an option. When you're a kid, you don't have the right to stand up for yourself to a teacher or a coach. Speaking up would have only brought more punishment. And standing up for myself would have made things worse for me. So I kept my head down, I absorbed his criticism, and I let him strip away something I loved. I couldn't stand up for myself back then. Sorry. I couldn't stand up for myself back then, and to this day, I regret it. When I finally quit, we were having practices during Christmas break, and I couldn't take it anymore. I mean, I was losing my mind, and I had to go in and hand my uniform in. And I told my coach I was done, and I still remember the conversation like it was yesterday. And he asked me, "This isn't because of me, is it?" And I said no, because I couldn't bear to hurt his feelings. I was a chronic people pleaser, even with someone who had hurt me and been so hateful to me. I couldn't risk upsetting him or having a confrontation or admitting that he had gotten to me. So then I broke down in tears and ran out. And before I left, he had told me he wouldn't tell anyone in case I changed my mind before school started back up again. But as soon as practice started that same day, he told the entire team I'd quit. I wish now, every day, I wish I had stood up for myself and told him the truth, that yes, you are the reason I quit. You made me hate basketball. And that's why standing up against these punishment squats in parkour became so important to me. At first I went along with it because I didn't want to stand out or break the rules, because I was in a class with kids and I knew they couldn't be defiant. But eventually I just realized I couldn't do it anymore on principle. It just really bothered me, and it was making me not enjoy the class. So one day I missed a precision, and when someone told me to do the squats, I said, "I don't do that anymore. I don't believe in being punished for making a mistake." And so I didn't do them, and I haven't since, and they never really said anything about it. Now, I want to make it clear, though, and very clear, that no one is yelling or hateful in this parkour class. The instructors weren't mean-spirited at all. They told you to do squats with a smile on their face. In fact, if my basketball coach had just made me do 5 squats with a smile on his face every time I made a mistake, it would have been so much better than what I endured. But this concept of punishments for mistakes still bothered me and had a negative impact on me. It triggered something from my past that I just couldn't ignore anymore. And, I worry about what effect it may have on some sensitive kids in the class. So for me, in that moment when I refused to do squats, wasn't just about the squats. It was standing up for myself in a way I couldn't when I was younger. Back in high school, speaking up would have meant more yelling, more humiliation, more punishment. But now I wasn't about to let anyone make me dislike something I loved ever again. I'd let that happen before, and I promised myself I wouldn't let it happen twice. Although I did let it go on for quite a while before I finally said anything. But even though I don't do the squats anymore, it still bothers me when that's part of the class. What I've realized is that the fear of failing in front of others almost kept me from trying parkour in the first place. Before my first class, I was terrified that I wouldn't be as good as everyone else, or I wouldn't be good enough to do this sport. I worried people would think I didn't belong, and that fear, was so strong it nearly stopped me from even walking in the door. And if I had been asked to do squats for messing up in that very first class, it would have been devastating. I don't think I would have gone back. And I know I'm not alone in that feeling. How many kids, or adults for that matter, have avoided trying something new or quit something they loved because the fear of humiliation outweighed the joy of learning? Standing up for myself in that moment was hard, but it was necessary. And it reminded me that this approach is wrong and it doesn't belong in any sport. It especially doesn't belong in a sport like parkour, which is supposed to be about personal growth and creativity and community. Punishment doesn't make athletes better. Encouragement does. Building people up, acknowledging their effort, and helping them feel confident. That's what inspires improvement. I can't stop thinking about how many kids might feel the way I did in basketball. They're afraid of failing and ashamed of struggling and on the verge of giving up something they might otherwise love. You know, Even now, decades later, I still have nightmares about that basketball coach. Those feelings of fear and humiliation and inadequacy, they've stayed with me my entire adult life. I've carried them into so many aspects of who I am, and I can't help but wonder what might have been if I had had a coach who built me up instead of tearing me down. Experiences like that don't just disappear. They shape you for better or worse. And, for any parents or coaches watching this, I just want to say this. If punishment is part of your training philosophy, please reconsider. Kids and adults alike deserve better. They deserve an environment that builds their confidence and not that tears it down. If your child has a coach who's overly critical, please speak up. Don't let them feel like their mistakes define them. For me, standing up to this in my own small way has been freeing. I've stopped doing squats for punishment, and I've spoken up when others have tried to bring it back. Because they're part of learning. They don't need to be punished. They need to be embraced as steps on the path to success. Thank you for listening to this little rant. If you've had similar experiences with a coach, or if your kids have gone through something like this, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. We need to work together to create environments that inspire and encourage instead of tearing people down. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.